All right, hello everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Brian, and I will be your host for this session. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm so excited to discuss one of the most important topics as it relates to enterprise transformation and progress in Agile talent and HR. So we're going to get started with that in just a second. First, just a couple of housekeeping items. You'll notice there is in the Zoom panel a Q&A button. Please ask any questions there. We will be taking some time at the end for any questions, and my colleague Bridget will be keeping track of that, so we'll make sure that your questions are there. If we don't get to all the questions, we will send those in a written response. You'll also notice you have a chat window, and we'll actually do a workshop there in just a few moments where you can chat in some of your responses. So folks, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm excited to spend this next hour with you. Just real quickly about me. Folks, my name is Bryan Tew, and I'll tell you, it's really difficult to have a last name like Tew. As you can imagine, it's a very common word, a number, and it's really hard for me to introduce myself to people. For instance, if I happen to meet another Brian, hello, my name is Bryan Tew. How did you know my name was Brian? So it gets me into trouble sometimes, so I try not to use it. However, I am from Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm an enterprise transformation coach and strategist. I was a key contributor in the Agility Health tool, the Enterprise Business Agility Model, and I'm excited to be able to share a few of the concepts that we have with you today. In fact, I'm most excited to be able to give you a taste of what's really going on in this whole community around Agile and HR. Specifically what we're doing in Agile transformation and how you can benefit from some of the tools and techniques and ideas that we have to share. So let's get right into it. Folks, one of the purposes that we have this webinar is that there's been this gap in kind of the Agile community around Agile talent and how HR is brought into the fold. So the certification organization IC Agile actually created this as their newest certification track. It's called the ICP-TAL, and this is filling that gap around Agile people. I love this quote. True Agile transformation is not a shift in development processes, tools, and mindset. It is a people transformation. Currently, HR and transformation leaders have few resources available to help navigate this important aspect of an organization's evolution. This track will provide valuable guidance for those responsible for aligning talent management to enable an Agile organization. So folks, I'm really excited that there's this recognition that this needs to be a focus. And as we've been working with many large organizations, what we're finding is that HR not only needs to be a participant and seat at the table with any type of transformation work, they need to be a key partner and help drive that area. So many of you may be from the HR organization in your company. Some of you may be from IT or the business. Folks, this is really about how do we come together and really understand the importance of developing our people, hiring the right people, managing performance in a more agile way, and really bringing agility to the HR area. So with that, we were a key contributor in developing this track, and you'll notice that we have several learning objectives in the certified classes. I'll just quickly go through these with you, and then we'll highlight some of these as we go. You notice we start out with organizational design, roles, and career paths. Obviously, HR needs to be part of that process, designing for the new way of working, understanding the roles, career paths. What we're going to be talking about is career mosaics. Also, learning and development. How do we make sure we have the right process for people to learn, to grow, and make sure they have what they need to be successful? There's talent acquisition, which gets into recruiting, onboarding, the interviewing process, all those different areas. And then enabling effective performance. Obviously, this is a big one. So we'll touch on a few key points here as well. But the overall performance management process, how do we make sure that we're engaging people in an effective way? And the whole topic around incentives, rewards, pay, and so forth. And then the Agile mindset in HR. It's not only how does HR support an Agile and business agility initiative, but it's how do you apply that to what we're doing in HR. Now, folks, with that, whoops, let me go back here. You'll notice that this area then is the missing gap, which is now filled in with this business agility track. So I would hope that each of you would consider looking at how do I get certified in that area and make sure that I have the knowledge to be able to speak to this important topic in an effective way. Now, I do want to turn the time over to you guys for just a moment as we get started here. And I want you to think specifically about what problems are we trying to solve with agility in HR. Now, this is where you can use the chat window, and please chat any of your comments out, and we'll take a look at what we're trying to solve here. Go ahead and do that for just a minute or two. All right, so we're seeing several here. How to make T-shaped people in a reality in organizations, career paths, incentives and performance management, how agile coaches can help, and obviously they play a big part in this. Effective training, growth strategies, selecting the right people, absolutely. Need to increase the speed of solutions, understanding how agile is impacting the organization. And that's something that not everyone understands, right? Team-based rewards and incentives, mapping the new required skill sets with engineering, yep. Sensible themes with the employees, how to manage high turnover, retention, exactly. Time to recruit, actually spending the time, budgeting on teams. Folks, those are great areas, and that's why we see that truly this area is really massive. There are so many things that need to be done, and in the past, we honestly haven't been very agile in these areas. So we're trying to help in that area. Folks, maybe some of these also resonate with you. Sometimes what we see is the image of HR, especially in the business and technology, just isn't seen in the way that they should be. They're seen more as the compliance people. And unfortunately, that's not the case at all, or it shouldn't be the case. Hiring top talent, employee engagement, absolutely. Also, improving your employer brand, making it a place where people want to come and work for you and feel like they're getting the best experience possible. Misaligned incentives, and that's one of the biggest obstacles that we find in truly gaining that business agility, because if my incentives are tied to things that are not based around outcomes, that's going to be a problem. We'll get into that a little bit. Skill gaps, developing agile managers. I find that managers have been the forgotten middle in the whole move to an agile approach. How do we help agile managers understand what it means to lead agile people in an agile organization? HR alignment, especially to the organizational strategy and what that strategic intent is. Also, revitalizing low-performing teams, or potentially it's just teams that have gotten stale, right? How do we reinvigorate? Enabling senior leadership and helping them become more strategic rather than tactical. Ineffective onboarding processes we see all the time. Establish effective communities of practice or guilds for learning. And then gaining that lean and agile mindset. Many are more in the doing agile, not really being agile. We want to help with that. Fostering continuous improvement, value-based career paths, making it stick. Folks, if any of these resonate with you, if you're experiencing problems in any of these areas, whether with your own organization or with your clients, then this topic and the information that we'll be talking about will hopefully help, and we'll provide several resources on how you can really get more into how to solve these specific problems. So here's what I'm going to do. I want you to think for a moment, what does the future of work look like? In fact, think about what it might look like maybe a couple years from now, maybe 5, maybe 10 years from now. Do you see how things are changing? Things are changing rapidly, and the people that we're hiring have different expectations, different needs, different ways of growing and progressing and learning, and we need to be on top of that. We need to be proactive about that. And so in the future, we'll see a lot more team collaboration. We'll see a lot more distribution of teams. We'll see a lot more tools that will allow us to do things we've never been able to do before. It's going to require coordinated planning and alignment of strategy down to the work. And so those are all things we need to be accounting for as we start thinking ahead. Now, with that, I'm going to take you through this journey of where we've been and where we are now. And this might really be familiar to some of you. Others, you might be in this process now. And I want you to think about, where are you today in this journey? Now, folks, early on, and this is years ago, the focus was all on team agility. This is the adoption of agile practices like Scrum, Kanban, and so forth. We talked about cross-functional teams. We have agile tools and workspace. Now, some are just beginning this journey, and that's okay. You need to start somewhere. But many organizations have moved past this. In fact, that leads us to the second step, which is now we have the team of teams agility. Folks, this is where scaling comes in. How do multiple teams work together? How do we shift to a focus on common outcomes that the teams are aligned to? This is where DevOps for many has come in. And this is where we start to look at leadership and culture as a way to support what's going on in this agile space. Now, if you're here and you're starting to improve that scaling area or your DevOps area, that's great too. That's a necessary step. What we're finding many of our clients are moving to is this third one, which is organizational agility. Folks, this is lean portfolio management, really understanding your demand versus your capacity. It's value stream structure. How do we maximize the flow of value, and how do we make sure we design the organization in a way that supports that? It's lean product maturity, more focus on experimentation, validating what you're building, the problems you're solving, and how you're solving those. And if you're here, that's great too. In fact, I'd say that this is where many of our clients are really struggling in this area. However, this next one is where we're going. And this is where our webinar fits in. It's talent development, innovation, and operational agility. So folks, this is where customer seat at the table comes in. Really, how do we understand our customers in a way that allows us to really nail it every time? But it's also the talent development and HR transformation. And folks, we want to involve them, HR, and involve those who would be thinking about these areas as soon as possible. But it's also outside of that as well in other business areas. Operations, finance, legal, audit, and sales and marketing. It just so happens that of these areas, at least in my experience, it seems that HR is much more willing to engage and be a partner earlier than some of these others. And there are obviously differences in different organizations. But I'm so excited about that, because as we've done some of these HR workshops and worked with HR organizations, there's been this attitude of, I want to know what this is about. I want to know how I can help. I want to know how we can partner to really make sure that our people are equipped to be able to do the job that they need to do in a way that really helps to improve our culture. And I'm really excited about that. Now, folks, bringing all these areas together really leads us to this area where we're going. And this is anticipating customer needs, sustainable learning, continuous growth. This is where we achieve more of that enterprise business agility. And folks, that should be the goal of what we're trying to accomplish, because that is allowing us to really deliver value to our customers. All these other steps are necessary means, and they are steps along the way, but we want to truly enable ourselves to be business agility experts. And so folks, with that, this is one area to help us achieve business agility. I do want to share with you where this fits into the overall model. Now, this is what we call the enterprise business agility model. And I won't go through this in detail, but you notice that there's 7 pillars. At the left-hand side, I have that customer seat at the table. So there's a lot here around how do we make sure we understand our customers and the discovery and validation processes and so forth. Lean portfolio management is a big one. In fact, it's where many are struggling right now. Org structure and design is a big one. And then Agile framework and mindset, where many have been. This is where you see the Agile for technology, scaled Agile, as well as Agile for business teams. That's where many have started along that journey. Leadership and culture is a big one. And that's where the manager transition, helping to help leaders understand what leadership agility is about and becoming more strategic. It's around building our culture. And folks, I would say that leaders have to drive the culture, right? And then one of the areas that we found was missing was how do we make it stick? You might have great coaches, great change agents, great leaders, and they implement these agile and lean practices, but then when those coaches leave or when the leaders move on or whatever it might be, we fall back to bad and old practices. So how do we make it stick and sustain it? And this is where internal change agents, the continuous measurement and growth, and you notice that this is exactly where Agile Talent Management comes in. We find that that's a critical component to making your transformation stick. So that's why this is so important. Now this last pillar, technology, this is at the bottom mainly because this is such a big one and it does support many of these other pillars around your technical excellence, your vision architecture and DevOps and so forth. So we're gonna hone in then on this Agile Talent Management here in this webinar, but I wanted you to just see the context of how this fits into an overall strategy for transformation. And if any of you are interested in learning more about this, I do have some resources for you to engage with, as well as any information that I can share here in the Q&A. So with that, folks, one of the ways that we make sure that we continually understand where we're at is to continuously measure. Now, I want to introduce to you Agility Health. This is our preferred platform for how to measure just about anything, including how you're doing in this Agile HR space. Now, we have radars for teams, for organizations, for individuals. What this specifically shows is how are we doing as it relates to gaining agility in the HR space. So you notice that this takes into account those specific learning objectives you saw, but breaking it down a little bit into competencies. So in organizational design, we're looking at the new way of working. So this is looking at like agile leadership, and then networked teams, business agility. There's the roles and career paths. So lean agile role definition, agile role skills and development in the career mosaics. There's the talent acquisition, which gets into recruiting, onboarding, hiring, and then the learning and development. It's really around the growth mindset, learning modalities, and the learner-centered attitude. There's the Agile HR mindset, enabling agility in HR. And then there's finally the effective performance, which is obviously a big one. This is around team performance, feedback systems, focusing on outcomes, the motivations, and so forth. Now, folks, you will have a chance, if you desire, to actually take a free assessment for your organization. So I'll share with you where to do that following at the end of our webinar. But I'm really excited about this. This is one of our newer radars, and it's actually made a big difference for HR teams to actually see where are we at today, and then partner with those key leaders in IT and other areas of the business to make sure that they understand what needs to be done and how we can really partner together on this. We always find that if we're not good at something, we should all know about it. So this is a way to actually understand where are we and where do we need to improve. So I'll share some information on where you can take advantage of this radar in a moment. Now, what I'll do then is quickly walk through and give you a taste of these different learning objectives around this the ICP-TAL workshop. And really, this is where our focus has been in helping organizations around this space. How do we make sure that we're taking the right themes and we're breaking it down into pieces that people can manage and own? So we'll start with this organizational design topic, which this is probably the one we're spending the most time right now in helping organizations really design for the new way of working. And as we mentioned, it is changing. So we need to be innovative around this. Now, let me be very clear here. This is not necessarily a reorg. This does not necessarily change who reports to who. What we're trying to do is intentionally design your organization to maximize the flow of value. So this might be a virtual structure. It might be how we form teams, how people work together, how they plan together, how they build outcomes together. So it's really an alignment of all teams, and this would include business and technology, and those who have necessary steps to accomplish outcomes, to really accelerate how those outcomes flow, how they get done. Now, there's been a real shift in the thinking in the Agile community over the last few years, moving from outputs to outcomes, and that's a big part of this. Unfortunately, a lot of the metrics we've had in traditional Agile has been around outputs. You see velocity and defect counts and so forth. That's not necessarily going away, but just recognize what it is. It's an output metric. How do we focus on outcomes, making sure the results are there? And which means if we know what the results need to be based on our outcomes, how do we design to maximize that flow? And folks, this is where HR, we find, has a significant contribution, especially around how do we make sure that people feel comfortable in being on virtual teams and potentially changing who they work with, in planning together in areas where it may not have made sense in the past. So we want to make sure that that's really the focus. In fact, I want you to think about these questions. These are things that you can take back and ask your leaders, ask your colleagues, whoever it may be. First is, how do we as an organization design true end-to-end teams optimized for flow? Now, you might need to go through an exercise, maybe a value stream mapping process to actually see where the delays and bottlenecks are in your process. And remember, you have downstream activities and upstream activities. So think about that entire flow of work. Next question then is, how do you align teams around these value streams and business outcomes? Now, I know it's been easy in the past to say, well, we're going to design teams around a project, an initiative, maybe a system, maybe a capability. How do we make sure that we're actually changing that and looking at how do we design around the flow of value? Does that mean that those systems won't have people? No, not at all. Absolutely, they will. But how does that help us to make sure work is flowing for the customer? Next question then is, how do we give these teams the stability and focus with the right resource allocation? And folks, this is important because what we see in almost every large organization is that teams kind of have the right outcomes at times, but they're not allowed to focus on those because there's so many other things. There might be support work, there might be emergencies happening, there might be helping other teams. Now, that needs to be managed as well. So how do we allow the teams to really focus on plannable work, maybe making unplannable events plannable so we can raise visibility to those things and then allow the teams to focus on their backlogs? Now, folks, what we're then saying then is that as teams are structured, we want to make sure that there's a way for them to understand and have that communicated to all team members what the right outcomes are, and allow them to actually plan their work in the most effective way given the expertise they have. That's what we're paying them for. So we'll look at some opportunities here in a second here. Here's what I mean. Folks, we're really trying to build a high-performance culture. And that's where people are excited to be at work. They're happy to do what they do. They love the people they work with. How do you do this? It's a major effort, isn't it? Now, I would say it really comes down to three main pillars. The first is clarity. And folks, clarity is that we have a shared understanding of what we're doing and why, with strategic alignment to our priorities. Now, this is something that leaders need to help bridge the gap or connect the dots for their teams. It is not acceptable to ever have people on teams asking, I don't understand why what we're doing is important, or how does the work that I'm doing matter? Folks, we should be able to connect the dots to what they're doing to the overall strategy. And that's where the outcomes are kind of that missing gap, or they have been for a while. How does the backlog work, the stories, the features, the epics, how does that apply to strategy? Now, the next thing then is the focus. How do we get a disciplined commitment to our priorities? Basically, we can finish what we start, and we have quantifiable metrics to show that. Now, folks, we know that people have different things they do. There might be support work, there might be emergencies, as we've talked about. However, how do we make that a process so that it becomes very visible, very predictive, and allow the right teams to have the right amount of time to focus on what they need to do to get their outcomes delivered? Now, the only way to start doing that is to track your unplannable work. Folks, that's just one thing that if you're not doing today, start tracking it. Understand where those things are coming from. Are they leadership requests? Are they true fires? Are there production outages? Are there support work? Where does it come from? If the team has unplanned work in a sprint or in their Kanban process, folks, they should be able to track it and understand where it came from, so we can make decisions on how to either make it plannable or potentially alleviate that work to potentially others or a different process. However, here's the other thing: execution. How do we get a value delivery process that's predictable with a single line of sight, and how do we make sure that the process is lean and efficient? And folks, that means that our teams need to have the tools available to them to be able to do their work in the best way possible. They also need to be able to have the right people to work with. And as we talked about, if they're reliant on bottlenecks or dependencies on other teams, how do we alleviate that problem? Now, these all work together. And I want you to just think in your organization, which of these is your strength, and maybe which is your biggest gap? Just think about that for a second. Some might have a really strong vision and strategy, but what oftentimes I hear from leaders is that they'll say, yeah, we know what our strategy is, but we're not very good at communicating it down to the teams. So how do we improve that? Or maybe focus is your area of most improvement, maybe execution. But folks, what we're talking about here can help with this. Now, obviously, we want to make sure we build a culture where people are inspired, they're happy, they're imaginative, and we celebrate success. And that's what we're trying to really build with the EBA framework and business agility overall. So the next area we're going to move into is the talent acquisition. Now, there's so many areas we can delve into. I am going to provide for you a landing page for our wealth of information around these different topics. However, what I want to share with you is this: we really need to hire for attitude and culture. In fact, what we're finding, the skills can be taught. People can learn. People can develop skills in a way that's very effective nowadays. What we can't oftentimes bring is that cultural fit. So we want to make sure we're specifically and deliberately hiring for that. I love this quote by Renee West. She said, "You can have the best strategy and the best building in the world, but if you don't have the hearts and minds of the people who work with you, none of it comes to life." So hiring for culture is really about making sure that we have a brand where people want to be with us. They feel engaged and they feel excited to be part of our culture. It's also about making sure we have a process for onboarding people in an effective way, so they feel from day one like they're part of the company. They have what they need to do their job. It's also about having the right leaders to be able to help bring people along, the mentoring, the coaching that's needed, and so forth. So many different areas there. One of the things that we do at Agile Transformation, I'll just share with you, is we have what's called a culture wall. And we bring our new hires to this wall every time so that they can understand who are we, and what are we about. Now, if you'd like to see a quick video on how we do this, I have a link here at the top. By the way, all of these slides will be available. We'll be sending these out to you following the webinar, so you'll have access to everything that I'm sharing here. But just a couple of things I wanted to highlight. Folks, at Agile Transformation, we do what we say we'll do. That's a real principle, a guiding principle for us. We practice what we preach. We stay above the line. I love the video around above the line. If you've seen that, it's really powerful. We always talk about, if you're below the line, how can we bring ourselves up, and how can we help each other? We're servant leaders, humble, we're hungry, we're smart. As a small organization, there's a lot to be done. And we need people that can be proactive and excited to just get their hands dirty and pitch in. And so those are things that we bring. And if someone doesn't fit our culture, that's a real problem for us. We can cope with mistakes and problems in areas there. What we can't do is fix the attitude. All right, well, folks, the next thing then is, once we've brought people in, we need a real strategy for developing talent. Now, here's our 4-step approach. Please adopt any of this as it fits for what you're doing. But what we recognize that every role needs a specific learning roadmap. If you have certain learning outcomes that you need to achieve, how do we get there? And so a roadmap by role. And then how do we measure? Now, folks, that means that within each role, we need to know, how are you doing today and where do we need to go? So this is where Agility Health from an individual perspective comes in. Yes, you may have seen the team radars and such, but how do we make sure that individuals not only can assess themselves on where they are, but also get some peer feedback? And this is what's really exciting, because if I can get some feedback from those who I work most closely with and recognize maybe areas where I need to improve, maybe areas where I have some strengths, that's going to help me build what's called a growth plan. And folks, that's part of what we do in this measuring process. You need to be able to measure and then build a plan to facilitate that growth. So that's where, moving down here, the growing happens. Folks, we want to enable self-learning. It is wonderful to go to a course. You'll learn a lot, but it shouldn't just end there. How do we learn consistently? Few things that we certainly recommend: videos, certainly mentoring with others, but we also have what's called the Agility Health Growth Portal. Now, folks, the Growth Portal, in fact, let me just move here for a second. The Growth Portal is where you, in your role, can go and find resources that might be applicable to how you can develop your skills, develop your abilities in your role. It might be soft skill areas, it may be technical skill areas, whatever it might be. In this example, you see effective facilitation. So how do I improve in that area? Well, we're going to show you what healthy versus unhealthy looks like. We're going to give you some recommendations on how to become a better facilitator. We're going to share with you some videos on how you can learn to gain expertise in that area. We're going to give you some resources. It might be blogs, it might be articles, it might be books, different areas where you can actually learn at your own pace. And then if you need to, you might have access to a coach or mentor who has specific skills in this area that you can at least have some time with. Folks, this is at growthportal.agilityhealthradar.com. Please check it out. Lots of great information there. But this is one of the tools we use to help with that growing journey, that growth journey. And then, of course, we want to be able to engage with a community. This is where a community of practice, a guild, something that allows people to engage with others in a similar area of learning, where they can share best practices, they can learn from others' experiences. Just a couple of tips. I know many of you have probably run communities of practice. Maybe you're doing that now. Maybe you've even failed with this area. Let me just give you a few tips. First of all, keep it small. Now, you might have a larger community. Let's just take the product owner role for a second. Maybe you're in an organization with hundreds of product owners. You might have a larger community, but when it comes to a community of practice, break it down into small working groups. I like to have that between like 10 and 20 people at the most, because that way people feel like there's something they can contribute, they can learn from. Now, if there's something you need to just share with everybody, okay, you can have a forum for that. But in a session where we're really coming to really learn from each other, it should be a smaller group. There should be a specific backlog that the group prioritizes. What do they need to learn? How do they need to grow? What are the things they're interested in? And I would suggest that this be the forum where they can actually share and build best practices around templates that maybe they use. It might be, for instance, the product owner area. Maybe we have some really good story examples that we can model after. Maybe we could critique each other's acceptance criteria to learn how we can get better in those areas. Maybe it's around documentation, but utilize this area, this community, as a place to really allow your people to develop in ways that they couldn't on their own. And that's what we iterate, continually doing this, having quarterly goals that they can achieve through these means. Now, folks, that moves then into enabling effective performance. And obviously, because this is such a big topic, let me just share with you a few of the key areas that we delve into here. Obviously, performance management is a big one, but also feedback systems. What's the right way to get feedback? Like we mentioned, one of those might be the individual Agility Health radars. That's been an effective way, but there's so many other things we can do. How do we shift to outcomes, as we've been talking about? The intrinsic motivation and the team-based rewards and recognitions, non-financial incentives. Folks, these are all really big areas. And I would say that sometimes we might be going really well in a transformation and then we hit a wall. Just want to give you a quick example. So working with one organization, they were doing really well at the team level and they started to scale and that was going really well. It was when we actually started to see that the leadership incentives were based on things that were actually contradictory to what the Agile teams were trying to do. And how do you bridge that gap? How do you start to tackle that problem? Sometimes it's an elephant in the room, but it's something that has to be done, which is why obviously we need HR as a partner in helping us with this. Now, the problem was this. These leaders were incentivized by how many projects they were starting in their organization. Remember, starting projects. So obviously the focus is, let's just get more projects started. Whereas the teams were trying to focus on how do we actually finish things and focus on the outcomes, not just start new work. And that was a real problem. So something we have to address. Now, let me just share with you a couple of quotes here that kind of help paint the picture for how big of a topic this really is. First of all, Steve Jobs, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. Folks, how do we empower teams? How do we leverage their ability to think and do the right thing based on their expertise? And then provide the guidance and clarity on the outcomes that help guide the work. And then Lee Iacocca said, I hire brighter people brighter than me, and then just get out of their way. Love that. Now, we had a panel of experts in our office last year. This was a real exciting event. And what we found is that there are things around performance management that we need to get away from. This is where we've been, and we need to move away from this. And some of these things where we're trying to move from, it's the annual goals and end of year reviews. Okay, we need to move away from that. The manager driven and with just some self-assessments. But a lot of times all of that's coming from the manager. Hire for skills, but fire for behavior. Focus on moving up or out. And usually there's a rating system, sometimes even a forced rank. And folks, that drives a certain behavior, and it's usually not a desirable one. Evaluation criteria is loosely defined and subjective. It's so interesting to hear people say, you know, if I would have known these things like months ago, I could have been a lot better. I could have been working on these things. And they only find those out at their annual review. We've got to change that. And then providing acceptance criteria that are clear and attainable in a way that the employees feel satisfied and feel excited about. Backward focused goals. Usually there's that link between rating and compensation. How do we make sure that that's an effective way or effective process that we're moving from? Time-consuming evaluation process, rushed and dreaded by all. Annual talent reviews, career plan for promotion, no transparency and goals. Folks, if you're struggling with these areas, yeah, there's not an easy fix, but this is what we're moving to. How do we build goals driven by teams as well as leaders? So it's a common agreement. Feedback from the most informed perspective. This is where, gosh, those that you're working with every day should probably have a really significant contribution into into how someone's doing, not just the manager. Continuous coaching and feedback. How does that happen all the time? If you're not doing one-on-ones at least monthly, if not more frequently than that, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And I would say this, when you're doing one-on-ones or when you're advising people on how to do one-on-ones, it's not just a shoot the breeze session. It should be significant around how are we setting goals? How are we potentially changing behaviors, understanding what it means to work in a team-based environment. How do you work on soft skills? Maybe do some role playing, maybe look at learning together and how you can actually clarify key points for your people. Those are all important things. Regular cadence for feedback, forward-focused discussions, simplified process for feedback and evaluation, team-based compensation changes. And you know, we want to be creative there. There are many ways to do this, but the focus on the team really is healthy when it comes to the team really accomplishing their goals. Feedback focused on improvement or reinforcement. And of course, the feedback always needs to be done with positive regard or positive intent. If you're going to criticize me, if you're going to demean me, that's not going to go over well. But if you give me feedback in a way that's positive and uplifting, allows me to grow, then I should receive that as a gift. So in our organization, we really look at feedback as a gift, and it truly is effective when you have that attitude. Employees self-assess and apply for raises or promotions. Career mosaics for just about everyone, and then goal transparency. And I'll talk about mosaics in just a second. So folks, you can see we're trying to shift to a better way of managing these areas. And folks, HR drives this, but they're partners with those in the organization that really have a lot to do with these things in the past. Now, as we move into learning and development and career paths, let me introduce to you the concept of career mosaics. What do we mean by this? Well, instead of just a ladder to climb, we're basically looking at what are all the opportunities that you might be interested in and might help you grow in a way that really will not only help you as an individual, but also the company. So if you're, for instance, a UX designer, or you're a product manager, or you're a sales consultant, or whatever it might be, are you pigeonholed into that area forever? Is that where you want to be? Because if so, we'll help you grow and develop in that area. But what we find is a lot of people have been put into roles that are either temporary or roles they don't even want, or potentially they're looking for improvement or areas that may stretch them in new challenging opportunities. So what are the different roles that might be good, a good progression for you? And then what are the requirements to get there? And then how do we set goals to make sure that you can achieve those, achieve the growth that you're needing to be able to qualify for those areas? So it's really exciting. These are the 6 principles or 6 dimensions of this mosaic concept. It's designing around your current gaps. So what are your gaps as an individual? And then also looking at the gaps within the organization. You know, maybe there's a good fit there if someone can learn certain things. It's enabling self-learning. It's an engaging with community, like we talked about, the community of practice or a guild or some type of way for them to engage with others in that similar role. It's being transparent about salary ranges. You know, let's not make that so hidden where it's not talked about. Let's understand what's required and what you can do to get there. Clarity on competencies. That's where the acceptance criteria come in. Some people oftentimes have had very loose requirements, and they sometimes feel that they've achieved those when in reality maybe they haven't, and it needs to be more specific. And then it should be designed collaboratively between leaders, managers, and the employees. Now, just to kind of share with you what we've done here, what we like to show is for each individual is you not only have measurement into where you're at today, and that's where the radar comes in, but you also have available mentors and you have a specific growth plan. Now, folks, all of this can be done in Agility Health, which is where we've built this, but it can be done anywhere. And what I'd suggest is that each individual should have a backlog, just like a team would have, of the things that they should be progressing on. In fact, setting goals. In fact, imagine doing this. What if you had your own sprints? Maybe a monthly sprint where during this month, I'm going to take on these 2 challenges or these 2 learning opportunities, and I can see my progress with my manager. And so when I meet in one-on-ones, that's what we're talking about. How are we progressing on those goals? How can I get the help or coaching I need? And how can I ask the right questions to the right people that might help me? So folks, our last topic here is around Agile Mindset in HR. It's really how do we apply the Agile Mindset to HR and how do we build that partnership? Now, I would just say this. Think about what Agile practices apply to the way that we do work in HR, the jobs to be done. Think of it this way. Can you benefit from a cadence? Maybe it's a monthly cadence. Maybe it's a biweekly cadence. Could you benefit from a specific planning session where you're actually starting to commit to certain goals for that cadence? Would you benefit from a reviewing process where we come together to review the work that we've done? Or a retrospective where we're talking about what's working well and what's not? Could you benefit from some specific working sessions where you can accomplish goals together? Could you benefit from visualizing your work? And so Kanban is actually a very popular tool to utilize in HR teams where you can potentially have maybe a Trello board like this that simulates a Kanban experience for recruitment, for onboarding. Maybe it's something very simple, just a board on the wall. Even for the interviewing process and how we're managing our candidates. Folks, there are many, many examples of innovative HR teams who have leveraged Agile to do their work better. So when we talk about agility in HR, it's not just what you're supporting the rest of the organization, although that's big. It's also how are you leveraging that yourselves? And there's lots of opportunities there. Now, folks, before I finish up, I do want to share with you a few awesome resources. In fact, what I would say in summary is that there is a lot going on right now in agility in HR, and I hope that you can be part of that. I hope that you can leverage some of the tools that are out there, leverage anything that we're providing here today. But there's a lot going on right now, and it's only going to improve. We're going to learn more. It's very much in its infancy. So to help you get started, we will be sending out the PDF, so we'll be doing that right after this, where you can download the presentation, leverage anything that's there. Please visit our Agile Talent and HR Resources Hub. Here's the link right here. Folks, this is where you can actually take a free assessment for your HR group and see how you're doing based on the competencies that we've discussed. Please leverage that as well. If you're interested in doing that for your organization, this is where we'd like to enable you to do that. So a few things that you can also keep in mind. Number one, we do have our next Agile Talent and HR certification class coming up May 1st and 2nd. That's going to be in person in Omaha, Nebraska. We do also offer this privately by clients, so if you're interested, please reach out. Also, next month we have the Business Agility Conference. Folks, this is an awesome area where you can actually learn about not only Agile in HR, which is a very, it's been the last couple of years a very popular topic, but also some of the other areas where agility is really making a difference in business. That's March 13th and 14th of 2019. And folks, please check out Agility Health, agilityhealthradar.com, where you can see some of the radars, the HR radar, but also you'll notice that there are many different radars for different needs. So some of the other areas within the enterprise business agility framework, if it's portfolio management, if it's around your agile teams, if it's around your leadership group, there are radars that can help facilitate that. So finally, if you'd like to connect, you can reach us at info@agilityhealthradar.com, or you can reach me directly at brian@agiletransformation.com. Go to agilityhealthradar.com for more information about the things we've talked about, as well as that Agile Talent Resources Hub. And folks, if you need any help in any of this, we are here to help. We'd love to be able to enable you to do this well. It's such an exciting time as we're learning how this works and helping clients through this. So I hope that we can help you as well. So folks, thank you so much for being with me. I'm going to turn the time over now for some Q&A. So Bridget, can you help me with that? Bridget, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, perfect. What are some of the questions we have?
We had questions about building role-specific learning maps. For example, from Scrum Master to RTE, Scrum Master to Agile Coach, Product Owner to Agile Leader.
Excellent, excellent. So one of the things I talked about was building that role-based learning roadmap. And folks, this is a deliberate process that we recommend going through to help understand what outcomes we're trying to achieve for each of those roles in order to maybe be qualified, whether it's for a new position, maybe it's to be promoted, or maybe it's just to enable themselves to be better at what they do. Now, what we typically do is we suggest certain workshops that they go through. These can be internal or external, and we lay those out. Typically, for any individual role, we recommend about one workshop per quarter. And this can be, like I said, a training course. It can be some self-learning. It can be a video course. But that way, every quarter, they're getting some information, some learning, some knowledge that will help them. And so we actually help line that out based on what the needs are. We actually do a jumpstart program where if you're interested, we come in and we actually help you build out per role what is the right learning path for each of those. So it's one of the services we provide. However, at the very least, I would suggest that managers be trained or educated in how they can build a learning roadmap for their people. And that should be done collaboratively. It might be around what are the right resources to have access to, who are the right people that might have expertise within our company that we can leverage as coaches or mentors. And remember, managers are great coaches. Leverage their skills, leverage their experience and abilities. Don't pigeonhole them into certain tasks. Allow them to actually build the organization, even if it's people that don't necessarily report to them. So just be innovative there. But that's one thing that we definitely suggest is building that learning roadmap and making it very clear for each individual role. How do you get to where you want to be as a leader, or potentially as whether it's a leader in the organization or a leader on the team. All right, excellent. What else?
Okay, we have a question for, do you have any recommendations for interviewing for cultural fit? What techniques have you used in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. We could talk an hour on that. I will tell you this, there's a lot around gamification of interviews. If you can make the interview process fun and engaging and actually allow your candidates to self-select some of the interview techniques, then it's going to go much better. Let me do this. As part of our follow-up, I'll actually send a link to a really good talk on some of these interviewing techniques. I'm just going to write that down, Bridget, so we can send that out. But it's a great one for getting some ideas on interviewing. But for instance, there's like there's the speedboat interviewing process where people get to select which things will help them in their career and what things they're looking for, which things might be holding them back. There's one where we have individuals on the potential team they'll be working with who are blindfolded, and that candidate actually gives them instructions on how to build something to see if they can work together. It's really fun. There's so many great techniques like that. So I'll send a video out that you can learn some of those techniques and maybe try some of those yourselves. It's really a fascinating topic. All right, what else?
What have been barriers for organizations who have adopted Agile HR?
Barriers. I would say one of the bigger ones, and I brought this up as an elephant in the room, is the incentives. That can be a big bottleneck when I'm rewarded, or maybe my bonus is tied to something that is anti-Agile or potentially not based on the right outcomes. That causes problems. So I say that's a big one. I'd also say that sometimes it's a political thing. We see some real top-heavy organizations, and how do we start to flatten a bit to a point where these valuable contributors aren't just managing, a few people, we're putting them into a role where they can actually leverage their experience. And that gets into that career mosaic a little bit as well. I'd say this, we have a lot of managers who've been promoted to managers or to leadership positions because they've been great problem solvers. They've been great at what they do. However, they're not good at managing people. And so how can we leverage their skills in a different role? What we found, especially in large organizations, is there's a need for these people. For instance, I might need a team of teams, call it a program, call it a release train, whatever it might be. I need some technical experts. Maybe it's a solution architect. Maybe it's a technical lead. But I need some people that can be able to do that. Now, how do we allow that to be to have similar compensation? That's where HR is involved, because we need those leaders. They may not just manage people anymore. And I'll tell you, I'll just give you one experience. I was working with an organization. We're transforming there are two managers. One was a development manager and one was a QA manager. And they weren't very good in what they were doing there. But they were both strong experts, technical experts. So the QA manager, ended up leading the automation area. And she came up with a program for how automation could be enabled across all the teams. She developed a black belt program and a training process where that could be done. And it was phenomenal. Now, she didn't have people report to her anymore, but she took on a really important position that was needed by the organization because of her expertise, and she was much happier with it. And I'll tell you, thinking out of the box around things like that is really important. So that's another barrier, is that top heaviness and having managers that may not actually be equipped to do what we're doing as people managers. And I would say one more barrier is really talking in, or maybe speaking in terms of being of doing Agile only and not truly gaining that mindset across leadership. When leaders think that agility is about the teams, then that's a problem. It may start there, but true agility has to be led at the leadership level. It's around aligning strategy. It's around understanding outcomes. It's around managing that demand versus capacity. Those are huge things that only leaders can take on. So one of the things that we spend a lot of our time doing, and why it takes so long to actually go through a transformation, is help organizations and leaders specifically understand that you need to own this as a leadership team. And you need to break that work down and have jobs to be done that can help support and enable your teams, not just say that it's the team's job to do the work. Because the bottlenecks that teams are experiencing nowadays are usually things outside of their control. So having that understanding and recognition is one of the key things. All right, we have time for a couple more.
Okay, here's another one. If self-organized teams make for the best architectures, how can HR not be seen as an ivory tower coming in from the outside? I'm from HR and I'm here to help.
That's a great question. You know, here's the thing that we recognize. Self-organized teams truly can provide for the best architectures, but they don't do it in a silo. Okay, and so the idea is that there's a vision that they start from. There's collaboration that needs to be done. Their guiding principles, and so we want to provide the guidance. We want to provide the structure, the guardrails, if you will, and then enable the teams to be able to take that guidance and do their best in creating, you know, architecture, whatever it might be. I would say the same holds true for HR. Folks, we are not there to just kind of shout commands and compliance things from on high. It's engaging with people in the trenches, understanding what the real world problems they're experiencing are. Gosh, go and talk to people, you know, talk about how their onboarding process was, talk about how they were hired and what experience they had. Just recently, we went through this and we had some of the new people from this organization talk about their experience, and there were so many horror stories shared. Now, imagine that HR and leadership come to hear those and be able to take those and do something different. But it's also around ensuring that what you're doing is also very visible, because you don't want to be seen as, you know, these guys in the closet or in these glass offices doing their thing. You want to be visible and have what you're doing visible to the groups, especially from your managers and leaders. Let them be aware of what changes are happening, what can and can't be done. Usually, for instance, when we're in a transformation, a lot of times what we'll hear from managers is, oh, well, we can't do this because it's an HR thing. Well, what is it that can't be done? Let's engage with HR and understand what their outcomes are and what the needs are, and then we can work with them on this. So I would say this, to get started with this, I would suggest that you, especially from those of you in HR, please talk to those transformation leaders who are maybe leading the charge around this agile and lean transformation, enterprise agility, and understand what problems they're experiencing and see where you can help. Offer your help. Be part of that group. In fact, I would suggest, and this is just my personal philosophy, but when we're establishing a transformation team, I have to have someone from HR on that team. Have to, because they're going to provide a lot of key ingredients for success. So a good first step would be to talk to those individuals and find out what they're experiencing, what problems they're having, and how you might be able to help. And I guarantee there are many things that you can do to help there. I would say the next thing then is educate yourself. Understand what Agile and HR really means. We talked about just a few things here, just kind of to wet your whistle. Understand what that means. Understand what's going on in the industry. There's so many proactive and innovative things that are happening today. be on top of that so you can offer your suggestions to your senior leaders and transformation leaders. And then I would say what's interesting about that is when we bring HR folks to like these public classes, we'll sometimes hear from like a VP or director of HR. They'll say, I had no idea that there were so many things going on that we could help with. I want to be a partner. And so for those of you in the IT side, please reach out to HR. Let them know what you're experiencing. You know, don't think of them as the bad guys or the guys that are untouchable that we can't communicate with. Reach out, set up a meeting, and just talk about how we can forge a partnership. And most of the time, we found that is great. That they love that. They want to be engaged. They just don't know how. And so I would say from both sides, make it very clear how HR can engage with IT, with the business, and make that partnership a #1 priority. Folks, thank you so much. I will take any individual questions that we didn't cover, and I'll write a response back to the group. Thank you for engagement, and I wish you the best. Thank you.